Well, dude, thank you for jumping on Super Life here. I gotta say, when we're recording this, your book's coming out tomorrow, right?
Right.
And in reading what you had put together and kind of looking at this stuff, I was almost shocked that this hasn't been talked about. I feel like you have put a finger on something that's so important and largely not even truly understood. And the obvious ones, the kind of the thing that's the couple things that stuck out just blaringly obvious, James, is it's part of the addiction cycle. Um, and then number two, we seek revenge to make ourselves feel better. And I was like, oh my God. And then as I kept kind of digging into what you had put together, I realized that this is proliferated through our entire culture in so many different ways. So I am just shocked and so excited about what you have put together here that I think it's a revelatory in what you have put together. So I just want to say congrats and truly a lifetime's work, it seems, with you. Maybe start there so people have an understanding, because I think that will give a good context as to your motivation in starting this thing. You kind of thwarted your own kind of potential violent act as a bullied kid, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's start there, and then let's unpack as much as we can here.
Yeah, that sounds great. And thanks for, that uh, exploration and acknowledging the impact and importance of what really 20 years now of neuroscience are finally bringing to light after 5,000 years of humanity struggling, right, with revenge desires and violence and not understanding what's happening to ourselves and why it's doing that and if there's anything we can do about it. And the good news is we can, and we'll get into that. But, sure, let me start with, my own origin story, which is kind of like a mini John Wick, kind of thing here. I was raised on a farm in central Pennsylvania. And when I was a teenager in high school, group of the farm kids around me on other farms kind of took a pretty serious disliking to me for reasons that I don't have to get into right now. But that led to multiple years of bullying. And that started with, just insults at first and shaming and humiliation that was oral. And then it proceeded on to, physical attacks that were more minor at first, tripping me, getting on and off the bus, or shoving me around in the hallway. And then that progressed to, more violent attacks, hitting, um, kicking, stuff like that. Just kind of made life in high school pretty miserable for me after starting out in a pretty good way. But that's what happened until and I was able to manage that. This was in the early '80s, where there weren't, at my high school at least, there weren't any anti-bullying programs, and you just kind of put up with it and dealt with it in the ways that you could. It was one of me against a lot of them, so there was not much for me to do other than kind of just deal, just kind of accept it. But one night, late at night, um, my parents, my brother, and I woke up to the sound of a gunshot at our house, and this was in the country. And we had kind of a one-lane country road in front of our home, and I ran to the window and I saw a pickup truck. So by this point, me and my tormentors, the guys that were bullying me, were old enough to drive, and I recognized the truck immediately as one of their trucks. And so we immediately looked around the house to see if there was any damage. What had they shot at? And that truck sped away. We didn't find anything. We went back to bed. The next morning, one of my jobs was to take care of the animals that we had. We had, beef cattle and hogs and a sweet little beagle hunting dog named Paula. And when I went out to feed and water her, I found her lying dead in her pen with a bullet hole in her head in a pool of blood, which is just as you can imagine, you don't need to describe it further than that. It's a terrible sight and a terrible experience to have your dog killed, and all for what? I didn't even understand why they had taken a disliking to me, let alone why they would assassinate a dog. For what? So my parents contacted the state police. They didn't do anything. No human harms. It was unfortunate that this happened. Let us know if it continues, kind of thing. And then the police went on their way, and that was it. About 2 weeks later, I was home alone by myself at night, pretty late, and I heard a vehicle pull up to a stop in front of our house again. And I went to the window to see what was going on, and it was that same pickup truck. But this time there was a loud explosion and a flash of light, and they had blown up our mailbox and shot it, out into the middle of a cornfield. And that was it for me. At that point, I had put up with years of this abuse, and they now killed my dog. They were actually blowing things up at our house. It was just extreme. And so, being a country kid, and, we had lots of guns. We did hunting. I was shooting a gun since I was about 8 years old. That's just how it was. And so I grabbed a loaded revolver out of that my dad kept in his nightstand, and ran outside, jumped in my mother's car, and I went after these guys. And, I'm just screaming in rage, driving down the road at crazy speeds on this one-lane country road until I could catch up to them, and it took a little bit of time. But I did, and I cornered them against a barn, and again, late at night, so 4 guys come out of this pickup truck, and they're squinting through my bright beams, trying to figure out who had just chased them down into their farm, and, they're kind of, curious and looking, and I'm looking back at them, and they don't have any form of weapon, and I have the gun, and they don't know I'm armed. And, it would have been so easy, and I was ready for what I wanted to do, and I wanted this to end, and I wanted them to end. And I started to get out of the car. I grabbed the gun, started to get out of the car. At the last second, I had this kind of like, I don't know, moment of visualization and realization of a deep awareness that if I went through with this and killed these guys, I'd be killing the person that I knew myself to be before that event. Whether I was actually physically killed or not, I would never be the same person again. And that was just enough to jar me kind of out of this, maniacal revenge-seeking rage, just enough to stop for a second. And then I thought, I don't want to become a murderer. That's not who I am. I just knew at my core that wasn't who I wanted to be, and I knew I was better than that. And I took my hand off the gun, I closed the door, and drove home, thankfully. But I was aware, in the hours and days later, after that I had been given this enormous gift. And the gift was that I didn't, become a murderer that night. And I think over the years after that, and I can get into what my next move was in my career path, going from almost murderer to a lawyer, which is a licensed revenge seeker who, lawyers are the only people in our society licensed to prescribe and manufacture and distribute revenge throughout society. So I was by no means done with my revenge desires and cravings. I just realized I wasn't ready to pay my own life to get it. But if I could get paid a lot to do it for others and maybe myself, that sounded like a pretty good deal. And so I did that. But over time, I really realized that I needed to do something with this opportunity that I'd been given, because so many other people go through with it. They pull that trigger and they're in jails or worse. They're dead. And I eventually dedicated my life to trying to discover the root cause of violence and why we want to hurt the people who hurt us when we could want so many other things in this life.
Wow. The moment that you had clearly saved your life, and it saved their lives and saved all of the other lives connected to all of the other lives, right? And often, and most often, if someone's to those places, they're not thinking correctly, and we already know in society that that's not the case often, that people go through with all kinds of crazy things. So number one, way to go to listen enough, and then to, in my humble way of describing, some sort of a little transmutation opportunity. But like you said, you weren't quite done with clearly understanding all of what was going on. And I want to get back to a little bit, obviously, the because I love how you described the legal system, and I think it's extremely important as we kind of look at cultural society at large and how it's feeding kind of what you put in the book, The Science of Revenge, and your life story. But before we get there, I think it's so important to, as people are listening to more of this, what is actually then, because that's the big, like, oh my God moment that of this revenge cycle. Number one, actually trying in that space to then avoid pain, which is so weirdly twisted in some sort of way. So what's, and then this addiction part of things, from rumination to actually going through things, what is going on in the brain, and the 5,000 years of us being oblivious to it. You shoot me, I shoot you, from cowboys and whatever else, and to literal today, that we justify ourselves in these actions, etc., etc. What's going on now in the brain, and the almost excitement that we can kind of pull this thing apart a little bit, rather than just this reactive scenario that seems to be just proliferated over and over and over and over again. What's going on in the brain, and why did you feel so, well, eloquently you put it together in the book, but yeah, what's going on in the brain? What do people need to know?
Yeah, great question. I mean, that's the 5,000-year-old question. So let's talk about what's going on in the brain right now first, and then we can talk maybe a little bit more about how I got there myself, in terms of going from that day to becoming a lawyer, to ultimately becoming a revenge and violence researcher at the Yale School of Medicine. Let's just describe what's going on in the brain. So what was happening to me? And I really want to also emphasize what was happening to the bullies who were tormenting me, because it was the same thing. And this is a hard concept to realize, but it was the exact same thing. They had a grievance against me. I don't exactly know what it was. I have some ideas. And I had a grievance, of course, against them. And that's really where it all begins. So what happens is this. First, we need to understand that your brain on revenge, we know this from brain scan functional MRIs, fMRIs. We know that when, we know that your brain on revenge looks like your brain on drugs. Scary thought. And that we know that revenge acts in the brain like a drug acts, and it delivers huge surges of dopamine just the way a drug does. So the way it happens, though, is pretty interesting. It starts with a grievance. A grievance is we want to define that, and what that means is a real or imagined, and this is also frightening, right? It can just be imagined. But it's a real or imagined sense that you have been treated unfair. You or someone you love has been treated unfairly or unjustly, has been humiliated, shamed, or betrayed. Anything like that. In other words, victimized. A sense of victimization. That sense of victimization, the grievance, is experienced by the brain as really significant. I mean, very, very significant psychological pain. And that activates the pain network in the brain, which is an area of the brain called the anterior insula. The brain does not like pain. It's out of balance, right? When the brain feels pain, it's out of balance, and it wants to seek some way to either end the pain or rebalance itself with pleasure. And the way that we've evolved is that we, as human beings, this goes back to the Ice Age, psychologists think, we've evolved so that we derive enormous pleasure from hurting the person who hurt us or violated a social norm, or their proxy, which means you can get revenge even if you're not trying to hurt the actual person who hurt you. And the easiest way to understand that is coming home, the classic story of coming home from work and your boss was, mean to you that day and you kick the dog. You're getting revenge by proxy against the dog because you don't want to kick your boss, you'll lose your job. So you take it out on, we call it take it out on the dog. But what we're really doing is getting revenge against the dog because of what our boss did to us. So the brain is looking for a rebalanced dose of pleasure. And it can get that by beginning to imagine, plan, and then ultimately execute revenge seeking, which is to say punishing or inflicting pain upon the person who inflicted pain on you. Okay, and that's very similar if you or anybody in your family's experienced substance use disorders or addictions. This is that cue or triggering that people, with those addictions experience when they see places where they've taken narcotics, for instance, or the friends that they do, or experiencing just stress in their lives that can trigger this. All of a sudden, what happens, we know inside the brain with revenge, is that after the grievance occurs, it activates the pleasure and reward circuitry of addiction. That is the dorsal striatum and the nucleus accumbens in your brain. Those are the two centers that activate for drug addiction, and they're also activating for revenge seeking, which is amazing. I can't think of hardly any more important discovery in humanity than this. And this just happened in the last 20 years. And shockingly, almost nobody knows about it. And there's a whole story that I won't get into about why that has occurred. But I'm here to make you aware of it. Maybe because of what happened to me when I was a 17-year-old, right? But this is the work of more than 60 neuroscientists at universities, great top universities around the world, including in the United States. So it's pretty well established, but it's very new. And because it treads on the idea of addiction, and people are often they feel like addiction is a taboo subject. And so kind of no one's really wanted to put it together in its clearest form the way I'm doing that now. And I think there's no other way for humanity to advance other than to acknowledge what the brain science is showing us, and then do something with that knowledge. And that's why I've written the book, The Science of Revenge, to make that information available, and also to make available things we can do. But let me just finish the brain story real quick. So what happens then? So you've got the pain, you've got the brain seeking pleasure and activating the pleasure and reward circuitry of addiction. And then the last thing that's happening or not happening is that you have the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is your executive function and decision-making center. And in addiction, that area of the brain is thought to be either hijacked or inhibited in some way. And when that occurs, going back to my story on the farm there, if I had the luck at that moment that my prefrontal cortex saved my life, it at the last second made the right decision, and I put the gun back down. If that doesn't happen for you or someone or anybody who's committed a violent crime in prison, I would lump them all together. That means that their decision-making center did not stop them and override this craving for revenge pleasure to make yourself feel better. And the last thing I want to say, before we talk a little bit, is that that pleasure that you get from revenge, we know, is extremely short-lived, just like narcotics. Narcotics give this great dopamine surge and rush, and then kaboom, there's the crash and fall. You feel worse, but you want more anyway. And that same thing is playing out for revenge seeking. Addiction is really, the simplest way of defining it is the inability to resist an urge or a temptation that has negative consequences. And revenge is, by definition, all negative consequences all the time. I mean, it's just filled with it because it is the root cause of all forms of violence. Every form of violence you've ever seen or heard of, you can go back and find that it began with somebody who had a grievance and is retaliating out of that grievance. And then it becomes a cycle over and over and over again at the societal level and at the individual level.
I mean, dude, that is so, it's almost like I have a bit of shock, but I'm also like I'm also weirdly just in this moment elated, because on some level, even though I don't understand the science like you do, I know what you're saying is true. When you have that radar that goes, like, you put your finger on an elephant in the room of not only yourself, almost divinely, like, because how do you describe that kind of moment? And then I have like some interesting kind of exploratory aspects, because I just want to elucidate a little bit on the cycle, because I think if we just expand a little bit on how kind of incestuous this cycle is, because imagine if you were kind of almost promoting your own before those events, but you were ruminating for a while on those assholes, they did this and this, and so you're actually building up your own revenge cycle. Your chemistry is feeding your addiction. It's not from an outside, addiction cycle, but it's an internal. And so there's a rumination, there's a keep the story going, get it supported by your friends and family. Yeah, they should, and they did this, right? And so you have all of this going on. And so I would imagine if that event happened, and if you were really kind of doing push-ups in the parking lot on your revenge cycle, that signal might not have even been able to come in. And so that's where it gets really interesting and so many nuances, because it's if that didn't come in, then all of a sudden you kill these guys. Now, now that revenge cycle for sure just strengthens because now you've done that and you felt justified in it because clearly they shot your dog. There's a track record here. There's a trail,
Yeah.
and then the families of those kids, they clearly going, they just blew up your mailbox or whatever they're justifying. So they're like, he's psycho, put him in jail. We want revenge on him, and then cut to, which we'll get to, the justice system, like built around this, and you're going, oh my god, right? So that's where I'm really curious about this internal justification, support systems by society and social media and you see it so much today in every area, and certainly political system, the justice system, and the story that we're actually feeding ourselves. That's where it gets wickedly kind of culturally kind of justified and almost weirdly supported in a victim place. And like, I mean, I just said a lot there, but how do you begin to kind of unpack, because there's so much nuance with all of this stuff. There's so much nuance. Thank God you survived it. But every day we meet, you have a conversation with a friend, you don't realize, oh, they've been thinking about this a long time. They've justified. It's like there's a cause, there's a thing. I just met a colleague who, was beaten and almost to death, but she transmuted it, and just to kind of help the legal system not let these, women abused go by. But it's like a slippery slope with all of this stuff. So I guess let me get your thoughts on some of that I said, and then let's go back to your kind of next installment of maturation of your legal pursuits.
Yeah, sure. And you did say a lot, and I agree with all of it. I mean, just a couple of things there. One is the elephant in the room is a great analogy. My analogy that I use for this is that it's on the tip of our nose. It's so close to us.
Right.
It's so close that we can't see it.
Right.
There was, in human history, there have been other instances of these kinds of discoveries that seem astonishing and eye-opening in that same way. One is, like the Black Plague, and I talk about this in the book a little bit. The Black Plague killed about 200 million people over the course of a couple of thousand years. It wasn't until the late 1800s that a couple of doctors, and during during the 2000 years, people were blaming it on things like the same things we blame violence on and other bad behavior, evil, crazy people. So they're blaming the Black Plague on evil and other things, racist things, all kinds of really crazy stuff. And there's a reason for that, because it was killing large groups of people in Europe, and nobody could see or understand what was the thing killing people. It was just wiping populations out. And these doctors discovered that it was an unrecognized, invisible. I mean, it's not a visible bacteria. That is the cause of the plague. And until they discovered that, there was no way for anybody to defend themselves. And that's what's going on here with revenge seeking, the violent form. And I want to emphasize, revenge is more often than not nonviolent. It's just words. Sometimes it's just thought and never acted on. It's just fantasies. Sometimes it's expressed. It's social isolation, isolating somebody socially. There are lots of ways to retaliate and hurt somebody who hurts you that aren't violent. But with regard to the violent form anyway, and all of them, it's the same thing. It's this invisible addiction inside your head to a drug that you can't see that's built in. Okay, so you're not injecting it into yourself. And the only way you can gratify this craving is to inject pain or a bullet into the body of somebody else. That is, it's hard to, it's so, like you said, it's astonishing. It's astonishing to think about. It's astonishing that we haven't figured this out a lot sooner. But, that's where we are. But anyway, going back, I really do want to emphasize that the nonviolent form of revenge. So if you're listening and you're like, this doesn't really apply to me, this is all a violence discussion. Not so. Every argument, right?
Yeah.
I mean, every bad feeling, Sigmund Freud said, we humans, every hour of every day are doing inside of our subconscious or our conscious, every hour are doing away with and imagining the elimination of the people who insult or wrong us. That's happening all the time. It's happening in your intimate relationships. It's happening in your workplace relationships. It's happening to children as young as toddlers. So revenge seeking begins in the toddler years, and it goes all the way through, the elderly, senior citizens. So it's the whole length of the entire human lifespan, except for infants, are dwelling on these revenge desires. So we need to understand that and why they happen, instead of assuming that it's just revenge or it's just built in. I have 10 fingers and 10 toes. I want revenge. Schmur, what can I do about that? That's not so. We have it. There's something we can do about it once we learn what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad you made the distinction, because obviously on the extreme end is this ultimate kind of expression of it. But as we kind of look at it, you reason and justify yourself every day, all day. Like, oh, they sent me a bad meme or a message, or that email had a little thing. And so then now you're creating story. And then on some level, like, I'm going to get back with them. I don't like them anymore. Whatever. I mean, it's so, like you said, it's so close that I'm just, I mean, it's a weird word to say, but I'm delighted that there's light being shined here, because this is so incredibly necessary to understand, because it's almost like we've all accepted this addiction. Some are more prone to it than others, clearly, and express it in all different ways. But on some level, we're all doing it, right?
Yeah, we're all, the way I analogize is we're all walking around in various states of high and various states of addiction. And this can happen, again, I just really want to emphasize that it's not the final act of revenge that is essential. You mentioned, and I think this was really a great insight, and it is exactly how it is. Just the rumination or thinking about or fantasizing about getting back or getting even with or paying back the person who offended or wronged you is nursing the addiction, is you're getting gratification from the fantasy of doing something to that person, whether you carry it out or not. And, I go into the book, I cover, mass shooters, I cover, Hitler, Stalin, and Mao, I cover human history in terms of explaining how deep and pervasive is revenge addiction. But it starts even with with mass shooter. You go, well, how could you be an addict if there's only one act of revenge here, and it was the mass shooting? Not so. They've been doing this in their head for months or years, and we society only know about it when the gun went off. But we're not realizing that was happening and being replayed over and over and over again in that person's head in all sorts of scenarios and ways that are just gratifying this craving and causing this, reducing the prefrontal cortex control center to stop the decision making. There's what I call it's the stop circuit, and the go circuit is the reward and pleasure circuitry. But this is happening and breaking people down, and without support, the right kind of support at the right time. And I refer to this whole event as a revenge attack. And it should be treated like a medical emergency, like a heart attack, if you know the signs. And I explain the signs in the book. But we should be calling 911 when we're starting to see this, either on ourselves or somebody we know, which means, of course, you need education. You need to know that this is what's happening. And then once you know about it, then you can start seeing it in yourself. You can see it in your loved ones. You can see it in maybe your enemy. You can see it all over the place, and you can begin to calm these cravings, which can only be gratified by harming somebody else.
Yeah, and to that end, call it the final kind of act. This not only is going on in their brain, but also what was happening to you. It's all of these little micro grievances that have been building up, and therefore triggering the rumination. To your point, weeks, months, years of this perpetuating. So it's not like nothing was happening and then all of a sudden this guy's shooting people. It's like the cycle has been kind of doing push-ups in the parking lot. Like it's constantly happening. And then that final, like, I am now in so much pain, which is the reorientation of this whole thing. I am now in so much pain. I am so addicted to this, and I am justified because of these people or this scenario or this situation. So therefore, the only way that I see this happening is to do that ultimate shot, which is ultimately some biggest version of a brain dump of relief, which is like literally mind-blowing how this is whole. And because no one's been able to explain, you can easily kind of like, why is it happening so much? And I'd love to hear your conclusion on that, because it's like, from my humble position, it's like, well, because this has not been understood, that this cycle of revenge addiction is just been not understood enough to do anything about it, and therefore we're just the result of so many things that are horrific. And then we're back to the same thing. Well, we should take away guns, and we should, like, but we're not even close to the proverbial actual chemistry and cycle that's going on.
Right. And why do we want to use the gun? So I think of it in terms of moving, the public health opportunity here is enormous to move society and to move healthcare professionals and mental health professionals in the direction of prevention and treatment of both revenge addiction and violence. Because, as I said, all forms of violence, intimate partner violence, and extremism, violent extremism, urban gun violence, genocide, torture, war, all of them. I mean, beginning, from soup to nuts, they all have this revenge origin. And I'm at the Yale School of Medicine, so I'm in the provider side now. And providers have taken themselves out of the game. In terms, in part, taking themselves out with the insistence, and it's true. The argument is, after a shooting, that you'll interview psychologists or psychiatrists and say, isn't there, a mental illness going on here? And the answer is invariably no. And the statement is no, and it's been studied, and it's true. It's been studied, and there's, minimal to no connection between a serious mental illness diagnosed in the way that doctors do this, and an act of violence. But there's two possibilities here, and they only think of the one, which is I look in the book of diagnoses, and none of them have violence as a or revenge addiction, and so therefore I conclude there's no mental illness that's driving the violence. My, what this research has shown over the last 20 years is that we just need to update the book. There is a new form of mental disorder or mental illness, serious, that is one that's recognized based on, we recognize substance addiction and gambling addiction as diseases or mental illnesses. And we need to update that to include revenge addiction. And once we do that, we'll be unleashing the entire power of the addiction professionals in the addiction industry, and all the research. Billions of dollars have gone into addiction reduction, prevention, and treatment. All of that can be unleashed, as well as the mental health providers can be unleashed to help us and help individuals who are in crisis with these powerful revenge cravings that they can't control before the act of violence occurs, which is when you really want it to happen. The police are there for after. They're not there to prevent very much. They're there for the after when it comes to violence. And this is because everybody who commits an act of violence knows, they know they're going to get, either be killed or jailed. And they do it anyway. And society looks at that and goes, oh, another senseless act of violence, or they must be evil. They must be demented people that are not like me and the safe people around me. And I'm here to say that's not true at all. They're just like you. They're just like all the people around you. They are dealing with a revenge addiction that can be treated and prevented. And it's in your interest that occur in your own family, inside yourself, and inside everybody you know and in your community. Because if you don't, you or somebody else that you know are going to be a victim of these revenge cravings that have run amok. And that's the way you have to look at it now. And if you do, it's, as you said, I think earlier, Dan, it's a really hopeful thing, because we have a way out now that we didn't have before.
Yeah, because now, obviously full expression of a violent crime, and everyone will say, well, it's got to be a mental illness, so we need mental health services, but they're missing out on this truly missing piece of the whole thing. To your point, whoa, the research shows that they weren't in our definitions before lining up with these conditions that we thought we knew about. So therefore, what is this missing element? And this is what you're talking about. This missing element is something we literally all can exercise on a daily basis. And when left to be addicted on all the time, then this further expression will happen. And that's that missing piece. And I love the fact, and we'll get into this, and I still want to get back to the law system side of things, but I also love the way out that you start to put an architecture around, because yes, do we have, my father died of alcoholism. So, and I worked at rehabs, and I just, as some way to kind of give in a way that was so harmful, and realizing, a loved one passed away. And so we have so much infrastructure, but we're missing out on this vital piece of information. And it's almost like, this is a weird example, so excuse me. So I've been all over the world, and you see Coca-Cola has an infrastructure unlike anywhere else in the world. So if you can actually use Coca-Cola's infrastructure to get water, food, shelter to people, but we also don't do that, right?
Right.
So but we have infrastructure. we have people, we have systems, we have rehabs, we have things. We want to help people in this way. And I think this goes to your other point of we also, this other side, which I want to get to, we want to forgive. Our brain wants to forgive. We want to, and I think the human spirit, we want to do that. But if it's almost unscripted and unrecognized, then and it's kind of off to the races with the addiction cycles that you're talking about. So, okay, so God dang, this is. I mean, I feel like I could talk to you for days on this thing, and I'm sure you've been doing this the majority of your life. In terms of the legal system, let's talk there first, then we'll get to forgiveness. And I love some of your almost what I say is like gestalting ways out of this thing. So we'll kind of put a pin in that for a second. But the your term of the legal system is the revenge dealer, which is whoa. Yeah. Wow. So if anyone's listening, if you're just grokking what we're starting to the tip of the sword here, and then you realize that the revenge dealer is the legal system, holy shit. So maybe curtail that into, you got into law, and then let's kind of go from that point of view, because I'm interested to hear how you almost were feeding your own system, I would imagine. Yeah,
that's exactly right. Yeah, that is exactly what I was doing. I don't think I quite understand. I know I didn't understand it at the time, but what happened was, so after this near mass shooting, when I was a teenager, and realizing how costly that form of revenge would be for me, I looked around and I thought, well, how could I get this revenge that everybody else seems to enjoy, but without either, getting myself killed or jailed? And I ran across the legal profession as an amazing profession in this society, and in most societies, in which we identify a certain group of people and we empower them to get the societal and individual personal revenge that we don't want everybody to get in a true vigilante, warlord system, right? So if we don't want everyone to be acting out their revenge fantasies with guns, we got to control this enormously powerful craving to hurt other people. And so what we've done over, thousands of years is created a legal system to do that. And then we created schools for people to go and use that in the, I guess we could think of as a safer than vigilantism way of doing that. And we license them and say that only those people can prescribe revenge for someone. They're the only people who can manufacture it. They're the only people who can distribute it. I mean, it's, and I hear you laughing, and you're right to laugh, because that is, for litigation, the litigation side of the law, it's very much that way. Well, I was a litigator, so I went to law school at the University of Pennsylvania. And when I was there, I wanted to be a litigator. And I did an internship at the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. And I got to start, even as a law student, you get to start prosecuting people who've committed some pretty serious crimes. And I was actually putting people behind bars. It was something, and it was very heady. And it was very powerful to experience this. And then when I graduated, I got to, I had the honor of being a federal law clerk for a federal judge, where we were, sentencing people to, long federal prison terms for all sorts of crimes, drug kingpins, RICO, economic crimes, all kinds of stuff. But even at that early time, even though I was gratified by this, it would feel great to be part of this revenge getting experience because it made me feel good. But like I said, it's a drug and it doesn't last long. And so you might feel good for an hour or a day, but it's amazingly short lived, incredibly disappointingly short lived. And then you start feeling worse. And I began, as I was looking at what I was doing, I was like, geez, these guys, their lives are over. We're sentenced another person to some long jail term. I'm going, that doesn't really feel good. Is that who I am? I'm the person who, is part of this system that's flushing lives down the drain and they're walking out in handcuffs. But it didn't, so I went, maybe criminal prosecution is not where I want to be. So I became a civil litigator at a big law firm, and I also needed a lot of money to pay off my student loans. And so I became a civil litigator, and I was making, for the time, an enormous amount of money, getting revenge for my clients who felt a grievance and felt wronged and wanted, or I was a defense lawyer and somebody else had felt that they had aggrieved them, and now they were being the target of a revenge act and they wanted revenge back. So it's always a circle, right? I mean, it's just always revenge, revenge, revenge. And then inside of the litigation process, there's this, every little skirmish is a revenge skirmish with the lawyer on the other side. So you're both trying to get revenge on behalf of your clients and for yourself. So you want to make life as miserable as possible for the lawyer on the other side and their client. They're trying to do the same to you. So you're really pissed off at them. They're pissed off at you. And you're just trying as hard as you can every day. And you're getting paid for this, again, mind you, at an hourly rate. And when I set it out this way, it sounds kind of absurd, right? And I think if you were a Martian coming down and looking at this, you'd just be absolutely boggled and astonished that this is the way it is. And yet this is the way it is. Well, eventually, to speed up, it started ruining my life. I became a revenge seeker extraordinaire in my personal life. I wanted to use the legal system for neighborhood disputes. I was cross-examining my wife and kids, and holding them to the same standards that I was trying to hold the other lawyer to and the other side. And I was a total jerk. But I was, most importantly, a jerk to myself. But I couldn't get out of it. And I started to wonder what is happening to me. And it just looked so compulsive. I wanted to stop, but I couldn't. It wasn't just the money. I cut down on the money, but I still wanted it. But every time I got it, I felt terrible. And I eventually got to the point, in all seriousness and sadness, I got to the point where, I was alone one night in a spare bedroom in my house contemplating suicide because I just could not stand anymore this life and this cycle of revenge seeking that I was involved in. And I'm also a very spiritual guy. So it was also running against, I'm a Christian. So it's running against Jesus's teachings on forgiveness, which I thought had to mean something. I mean, this was a brilliant man. And I don't think he talked about forgiveness in the astonishing way that he did, for no reason other than, well, this is the way to get to heaven. I was like, there's got to be more to it than this. Because heaven wasn't my problem. I was just trying to get to next day. Right? So what happened was I stopped doing that, and I associated myself with a friend who was a client on good day, and who I did non-litigation work for happily, who was a psychologist. And I said, hey, do you think we could be addicted to revenge seeking? I said, I think I am. And I said, I think the lawyers around me are. And he's like, nah, come on. I think you're exhausted. I think you're tired. You work really hard. You work way too hard. But why don't you take a vacation? And I'm like, why don't you send me the book on how you diagnose addiction so I can see for myself if you're right? And when I looked at it, there's this set of criteria, and anybody can see it. The book is called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It's the manual that doctors use, published
Just a
by the American.
light
Yeah,
reading.
yeah, light reading, 1,000 pages. But it's the manual that doctors use, published by the American Psychiatric Association for all mental illnesses, including substance use disorders and gambling addiction. And if you look at the criteria in there and you substitute for gambling or substance, if you substitute the word revenge, there are 11 criteria. I just had this huge, light bulb moment, and I went, "Oh my God, and if you have, more than 6 of these in a year, you have a serious substance use disorder." Well, when I did it with revenge, I had, I don't know, 8 or 9 for revenge. So I'm like, I'm a serious revenge addict. I'm in trouble. I mean, I'm just in deep, deep trouble. And there are no, there are no rehabs or 12-step programs for revenge addicts out there, unfortunately. I'm doing my best to change that, and I hope before I die, I do. But there weren't. And so I had to kind of do all of this myself, and I eventually created a kind of, it was a 9-step, now it's a 5-step system for breaking through revenge addiction that also enables this concept of forgiveness. And I think we could, talk about the brain, what happens inside your brain when you forgive, which is so miraculous and so powerful, and you can access it anytime, anywhere, without a prescription or a doctor, that everybody needs to know about this. It's not, you don't have to be spiritual. It has nothing to do with spirituality. This is brain biology. It may have a spiritual component for believers. You don't need to be one. What you need to know, though, is the truth behind what happens inside your brain when you forgive, and it is the most powerful, instantaneous experience of self-healing that I'm aware of. It's just incredible.
Wow. Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's look at it through, because I want to bring it down to maybe like a grudge,
Okay.
right? A normal person who's like, hey, I was on the 405 in LA, and you cut me off, you put on your brakes, you're pissing me off, like you're doing that, and now I'm justified, and now we all know this, any little event, and now the bee's good out of the hive, and now my day's shot. And now I'm like, if I see that MFer anymore, I'm gonna whatever. Cut to, if you're in a small town, you're definitely going to run into that person again. So it's so slippery how easy it is for our brain to go, that was definitely wrong, and you might be right.
Yep.
Therefore, now I'm justified. Now I turn the brain into the revenge cycle of dopamine hit, and now I'm just like, fuck that guy or whatever.
That's right.
Yep.
Yep.
And so we can do that multiple times a day, even in small doses. So that I want to just set that stage, because that's how nuanced and small, quote unquote, this can be. But when unchecked, it creates a really big emotional problem, physical problem, relationship problem to you and other people. Like, so I just want to, that's what's so, like, my mind is melted and bent now forever after this, right, after seeing what you're doing. And that's why I'm just like, I'm so touched by this. So from that grudge perspective, and also like as big as they get, from you were seriously wronged, and you know, God forbid, a child was killed or whatever,
right?
Oh, the gamut. So then now let's talk about, I'm going to forgive the guy on the road. I'm going to forgive the killer. There's many different aspects of this, and there's ways to do that. And there's so much internally that we can do. And also I want to make the distinction, because this is a slippery one, because I think that just the world doesn't do it well at all. Our culture is that if I forgive, therefore I'm supporting, or I am not understand, or I let them go with what they did. And so let's break that apart a little bit and describe how, through those lenses, how important it is to forgive on many different levels.
Yeah, thanks for that opportunity to talk about that. And the key thing, the best starting place is to kind of understand that probably almost everything you know about forgiveness is wrong. We get it wrong. We don't understand it. We don't use it correctly. And when we understand it, especially at the brain biological level, everything makes sense, and it's something you'd actually want to do because you're doing it for you, not for the person who hurt you. So a couple of things. And I'm going to show you how when you forgive, it benefits the victim only. Doesn't benefit the perpetrator ever. It has nothing to do with that. So let's just talk about what happens inside your brain. We want to begin with the same place that we started with revenge seeking. You have a grievance. A grievance is painful. The pain has activated the pain network inside your brain. Your brain wants the pain to stop. Yes, we have evolved so that we could seek pleasurable revenge to give ourselves a hit of dopamine that would be pleasurable and counteract or rebalance the brain for a short period of time. The problem with it is it comes with enormous negative consequences. Is there something else that the brain was wired with that could actually, instead of just cover up the pain with some revenge pleasure that's short lasting and filled with bad ideas, is there something that the brain can do to just eliminate the pain altogether? And it turns out that there is. So forgiveness is something that you do, it's a set of circuitry that you activate inside your brain. And here's what happens when you forgive. So the first thing that happens is that it shuts down that pain network instantaneously. So forgiveness stops the pain, the very pain that you want stopped. You think that the only way to deal with it is to get some revenge pleasure, but that's not true. We are actually hardwired to actually stop the pain altogether. It also, the second thing forgiveness does is it shuts down the reward and pleasure circuitry, the craving circuitry of revenge. That becomes silent when you forgive. So these two enormous brain circuitry benefits. And then the third thing that it does is it actually activates or reactivates the prefrontal cortex, that executive function, good decision making and balancing, costs and benefits part of your brain to help you make good decisions. So it's benefits all of the way around. And here's the thing, you don't have to even tell the person who wronged you that you forgive them ever to get these benefits. You can get these benefits instantaneously at any moment, and you can get them over and over and over again without any cost to you whatsoever. Just by making, let's go back to your, the road rage incident, right? So the guy cut you off on the 405, and now you're just furious and you have a decision to make. Am I going to go after this guy, flip him off, cut him off, put myself in harm's way, put everybody else on the road in harm's way? Sure would feel freaking good, right? I mean, I just feel fantastic to do that for about a minute. That's revenge. Or could I just imagine, and any of your listeners can just do this right now, Darin. I mean, just if you have a grievance in your mind, and you know you do, because we all do, we can all think of one at almost any instant of any day, maybe 100 of them. But pick one. And for a second, just imagine a decision to forgive that. Just for yourself. You don't tell anybody about it. It's between you and you. That's it. It's something you do in your head. The pain is in your head. The desire for revenge is in your head. It's all happening in your head. Because the event, the grievance, happened in the past. It's not even here anymore. Can't find it. You can't experience it with your senses. It's just a memory. You can control your memories. You can control your cravings. You can control your own pain. So imagine for a second, close your eyes, take a deep breath as long as it's safe for you to do, and imagine forgiving. You will experience at that second, and it's almost instantaneous, a sense of relief. The relief is coming because the pain, the psychological pain of the grievance, has suddenly quieted. The revenge craving has suddenly quieted, and you're calm again. And with the pain gone, you're right where you wanted to be. With the revenge desire that would have resulted in you driving down the road like a maniac at 100 miles an hour to cut that guy back off since he cut you off. That's all that you need to do, except do it every time that you think of that grievance and that person again. And when you start imagining that, you haven't even forgiven. You haven't declared forgiveness. You just pretended to experience what it would feel like. You will generate a series of these moments of relief. And suddenly you'll realize you love those moments. Who doesn't love relief? Who doesn't love the absence of pain? Who doesn't love the absence of cravings? Because cravings are always painful torments, right? It's always driving you. I mean, the whole purpose of cravings inside the brain is to motivate you to do something, whether it's, procreate or get food or whatever. But it's a sense of a lack and a need to go and get something. Cravings are very painful to manage, and this eliminates those too. So we're talking about a kind of almost amazingly miraculous event that you can control, that your brain is hardwired to perform at any time. It has nothing to do with spirituality. You don't have to be a spiritual person to benefit from this at all. And if you're spiritual, all the more. Great. That's perfect. But you don't need to be. And you can get yourself right really quickly in that process. And as I mentioned to you, I think I mentioned, Darin, before, I created this trial process, an intervention, and we could talk about that if you want, on how to make this an even more fun and powerful experience by getting also a little bit of the revenge you want safely, as well as holding the person accountable and being heard because you've been victimized. And that really helps. It seems to help a lot of people.
Yeah, so going back to that thing, so just imagining, right? So you're not you're even if it's a severe situation for someone, like it's a severe, they've been perpetrated and it's intense and they have no idea how to even forgive any of it, but just allowing yourself the opportunity of imagination without even the part of you that doesn't want to give up your revenge yet. You don't want to give it up, but just the practice of imagination is also like, okay, I'm just going to do that. Maybe 2 seconds of that is like, and listen, let's use the spiritual side of it. However you want to use it. If you think a tree is giving you information, or Jesus or whomever, what would Jesus do? Like, and that any way that you can get yourself to practice imagination, because we already know that brain doesn't know the difference. So just the practice, I love that because that's applicable right now.
Yeah.
And then I do love, and then I know we can keep going here for a long time, but the trial of your mind. Because I studied psychology. I have a master's in psychology. And so we did a lot of gestalting. And that's immediately what I was thinking when you could be these characters in your own trial. So, yeah, talk to me about that. Because I think I've done it in many different ways. And it is wildly powerful because you literally embody the perpetrator, the victim, in this case, the judge, the jury, so yeah, describe that, and then maybe from that, how could people get in touch with that if they don't, or maybe you have it in the book that they could walk through.
Yeah, and I do. It's in the book. So it's in the book, the book, The Science of Revenge. It's also in an app that I have available called the Miracle Court app. And that you could go to miraclecourt.com, miraclecourt.com to download this app, because it's not on the normal app stores. It's a web app. So you just download it right there onto your phone. But So what it is this is called the non-justice system or the miracle court. And I called it the non-justice system, which is not injustice, right? You have to be careful with these words, but it's like nonviolence. It's a decision to not seek justice in the form of revenge, non-justice. So in the non-justice system, trauma experts will tell you that one of the problems with getting past trauma, if you've experienced trauma, which is just victimization, it's a grievance, right? I mean, we're talking about trauma here all throughout this entire discussion. We've really been talking about trauma. But one of the difficulties for people who've been traumatized, one of the problems or the reasons they can't get over it is because they have this seriously long-lasting psychological pain. And the reason they have this long victimization and this rumination is because there's this need, psychological need, to be heard and to hold somebody to account. These are normal, natural needs. It's very close to revenge seeking. But it really doesn't have to be punitive, but it's really, I want to be heard. I want somebody, there's a famous quote from Bessel van der Kolk, famous trauma doctor, who said, people just want to be heard, and there's nobody around to say, hey, I heard what happened. That's a terrible thing that happened to you. I'm listening. And I would feel pain too. And you do feel pain. So here's what we do. With the non-justice system, it is a courtroom of the mind. Think about this for a second. As I said before, grievances, victimization, trauma, all these are things that happened in the past. They're not in your today present. In your today present, where your senses are, in the present moment, you can't experience any of that stuff. The only way you can experience it is with a memory that is a thought formation inside your mind. So why do we really need a concrete and stone and wood courtroom with a judge and lawyers outside of your brain? All of this is outside of your head to somehow get over. We're expecting the courts to actually get us over all of this victimization and heal us. They never do. They're incapable of it. They live outside of your mind. They don't deal with your memories. So what we could do is create a courtroom inside your mind where you get to play all of the roles yourself. So as you said, Darin, you get to play the victim and the prosecutor. You get to play the defendant, which is critical. So you play the defendant testifying at the trial, their side of the story. So first you testify as the victim and you say what happened to yourself or with a partner. On the app, you can do it. I lead you through this in an audio format, but you speak it out loud. It's important that you be alone, say it out loud what happened. Then be the defendant and imagine what the defendant would say. Sometimes I've had people who get to that stage and are so thorough in their playing of the defendant's role that they stop the process right there and go, you know what, I'm good. My grievance is gone. I've just sort of developed this empathic kind of moment here where I see the whole victimization experience that I had differently. I either understand the motives better, or I understand maybe I'm responsible for part of it. Maybe I understand more why they would have done it. But whatever it is, that can happen, but it doesn't happen. It probably happens 30% of the time. Then you get to play the judge and the jury and decide is the person who harmed you guilty or innocent? You're the judge. It's amazingly powerful to play a judge. People really love doing that. A lot of folks never get that opportunity to experience what it's like. And also it's terrifying in a sense to experience what it's like to have somebody's fate in their hands and to make the ultimate decision about whether they were guilty or innocent. Then you get to play the warden. And as the warden, or as the judge, you get to decide the sentence. That enables you, and in the non-justice system, you can have any sentence. It doesn't have to be a jail term. It can be anything you want. I have an experience where, for a dog loss, somebody maybe killed the dog. Maybe you want them to be mauled by a dog. That could be your sentence of punishment. But as the warden, you don't get off the hook. You have to actually experience punishing the person who wronged you. And that's a pretty difficult time. Some people will really enjoy it at first because you're finally getting this revenge that you've been aching for. But you can't avoid the impact of being the instrument of someone else's pain. I analogize this to a hammer striking a nail. A hammer can never avoid the impact of the blow. We always think about, oh, poor nail gets hit by the hammer, but also poor hammer, because the hammer hit the nail. And that's what you're doing when you're acting vengefully, is you are becoming the hammer on that nail, and you cannot avoid the pain that person is experiencing at the moment that it happens. And then the last step is called the final judgment. And in the final judgment, you're invited to become the judge of your own life. And in that moment, you're invited to do what we just talked about a little earlier and imagine what forgiving it would feel like, as opposed to seeking revenge. And then you are asked to make the decision for yourself. You were on trial all along, it turns out, not the person who wronged you. Do you want to set yourself free, or do you want to continue to live in pain? Most people, most of the time, want to set themselves free. And that just means making a decision to stop seeking justice in the form of revenge and moving on. And that's what forgiveness does.
Wow. I mean, the fact that you've almost full circle created a system that's based kind of in this way, to be able to sit in the chair and the experience of these other people, and the fact that you came from the legal system, I think it's divinely brilliant. And
thanks.
And there is something so powerful about actually the willingness to go through these things, because I think we all do carry the same kind of spirit, and allowing the human experience, we never give ourselves any time to often have the real experience underneath the experiences, right? We don't know how to grieve. We don't know how to feel our feelings. Like,
sure,
we're inundated with stuff. And this is truly setting people free from this thing that, wow, it could be one of the biggest cycles we're in, especially in this type of culture. And there's so much we can get into. There's social media, there's all kinds of political systems, and like all of this stuff. But I encourage people, if you're excited about this as much as I am, I can't wait for that book to drop tomorrow. And for people, when the release, the book is dropped, so go get this, because this is a manual of living, and living a level of freedom that I think it's time, man. It is time. I'm really touched and grateful for what you put together, and I'm glad you didn't continue the cycle as a kid, because that would have been a hell on earth that you would have lived from that point on. So
it was. I really appreciate your talking about this in terms of freedom, which is maybe something I haven't done enough of, and I think I'm going to borrow that from you, because there really is a freedom that we're all seeking, and that is available. It's right there. As close as, I said that revenge desires are right on the tip of our nose. It's so close we can't even see it. It's the same thing with forgiveness. It's right there. But it's so close. Because our brains are wired for both, right? So we just need to choose which set of circuitry we want to activate. So take control of your own life and activate the circuitry that benefits you the most. And you can decide which one that is. It's pretty obvious, though, when you think about it.
Yeah. Well, dude, it's such an enlightening conversation, and we'll put all of the links in the show notes for people to access. I hope people come in droves to release themselves from small or big, types of challenges, because it's so easy to do that. I'm grateful for the work, and good on you for putting all of this together and dedicating 20 plus years to this thing, and I'm stoked for it. Well, and I hope it gets in the world, man.
I do too, and I just appreciate your time, your audience's time to hear this, and your enthusiasm for it is just it stokes me to continue doing this work, and I need that because it's been it's a long
Yeah.
journey. So
Yeah.
I thank you so much, Darin, for this outstanding interview. I'm just deeply, deeply grateful.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay.